Hello everybody, I'm Nora and I have an idea for a new series that I'm incredibly excited about. I want to make what's called fidget blankets. Now, I thought that I had made this idea up. I thought this was my own unique idea, and then I looked around and I realized other people are making fidget blankets too, which is fine. But I'm sure you're familiar with fidget spinners. There's something that's kind of the rave right now with kids where you kind of hold onto a little piece of plastic and you spin a little thing around, and they're supposed to be really good for kids who have trouble focusing and that kind of thing. And so a little while ago, my friend who's a teacher asked me to make little fidget pillows. And her idea was to make these little pillows filled with like rice, like little rice pillows, and then have little different things, different textures on the pillows for the kids to kind of feel and play with. And I made a couple of these and I thought that was really cool. What a neat idea. And then I thought, wouldn't it be neat to have a whole blanket or a whole quilt filled with different kind of textures, different things you can hold on to, whether it be like little handles or little pieces of fabric sewn in different ways and that kind of thing. And so that's what I want to do. I want to start just little by little making little pieces of fabric that are sewn in different ways. And then those pieces of fabric can either come together in one big quilt, or what I'm anticipating is, you know, a couple of them might go together in one quilt project and another couple of them might go into another quilt project, or I may use bits and pieces from other projects I've done within this now fidget blanket or fidget quilt project. So that's my thought, and I just want to start putting some pieces together. I have a couple ideas I want to start with, and I'm thinking for each video I'll just kind of make different stuff, different little blocks. I've never done this before, but I have a piece of fusible interfacing. It's fusible on one side, the side that's facing up, and not fusible on the other side. And I just made a quilt and I saved all of my string and the teeny tiniest pieces. And I thought what I would do is try and layer those on top of the fabric, heat it so that it sticks to the fabric, and then do some sewing on top and see how that comes out. So let's just start. Let's give it a try. And any of the pieces that are too big, like even this one is a little bit big, I'm gonna put aside. So I just want the teeniest, tiniest bits. And because these all came from the same quilt, they all kind of have a similar color scheme, which could be kind of cool. So there's more in the bag, but let's start with that. That's probably even too much. But I'm just going to kind of layer these all across so that there's a thick layer on top. And then after I fuse it to the interfacing, I'll kind of trim any leftovers off. Two pieces too big. And you want to make sure it's fully covered, because otherwise the interfacing will fuse to your iron. So I have one layer here. Let's add a little bit more to make sure there's a nice thick coat. That's looking pretty good. As you can see, you cannot see the interfacing at all. It's completely covered by these little bits. So now let's add the iron. So nothing seems to be sticking yet, so I'm gonna make my layer a little bit thinner. See if I can get some of this stuff to stick. All right, let's try it again. I have a little bit of water in my iron now, so maybe the steam will help. I'm gonna give a little bit of water squirt over the whole thing too. So this seems to be sticking a little bit better. So let's try and peel some of the top pieces off. But as you can see, there are pieces that are stuck there, so that's good. Maybe if we even pick it up and kind of shake it off. So this is interesting. I think what I'm gonna do is maybe trim some of these pieces off and then see if I can get it to stick a little bit better. Find a couple bare spots that need to be filled with some pieces. I see a couple kind of peeking through around. Oops, I just burned myself with the iron. Get that out of here. And let's try with the iron again. So what I don't love is that you can still see the interfacing through a lot of this. I just had an idea. What I'm thinking is, what if I put some of these pieces down on the mat and then turned this over and heated it from the back. Let's try that. Okay, I made a little nest on the board. I'm gonna turn this facing this way and try and heat. I'm gonna add a little bit of water, squirt a little water on there. Let's try this. All right, let's flip it over and see how that went. That's better. That's much better. I'm gonna do that again because I can still see some pieces through, but I think this is beginning to look kind of cool. So let's try that again. I just had an idea. I thought, since I have this fabric glue, that if I put a little dot of fabric glue where the interfacing is showing through and then put some of these pieces on top, that might work. So let's try doing that. Okay, let's put this aside and let that glue dry. The other idea that I had was using pieces that are a little bit bigger. And I think this might work a little bit better because there won't be a lot of overlap, just a bit. So I was thinking I would just kind of randomly take these pieces that are a little bigger out of this bucket and line them up, going all the way up and down the interfacing, and then attach it that way. Again, sewing some seams once it's secured to the interfacing. So let's try that. And I really like this kind of fringy part where it started to fray a little bit. I think that's a nice texture and visually it looks cool. So I'm gonna leave all that on. Let's try and iron down half of it and see how it's going. Just because I'm curious. Yeah, that's sticking pretty well. Good, we'll keep going then. Let's iron the whole thing down. So I like this very much. That came out really cool, and I think it'll be even better once the seams are sewn on. I'm gonna kind of just do that randomly. I'm not gonna sew on every single piece, but I think that it will catch enough of the pieces that it will all stay secured between the sewing and the fusible interfacing. This will be nice and secure, and then I'll put a border around it and it will look nice and clean. So let's do another one of these, a smaller one, while we continue to wait for the other piece to dry. There, and let's heat it. Oops. Again, I love this one. Here is the first one that I did, and I'm just gonna back it with some of this stripy fabric so that if you can see through in any spots, it'll be a nice bright colored fabric in the back, and that will just secure it really nicely so that it's on something solid instead of just the flimsy interfacing. And I have a really bright color yellow in my thread because I think that the top stitching will be really cool. I'm gonna put my sewing machine on the zigzag stitch. I'm gonna start in the middle and I'm gonna kind of try to spiral all the way around and see how that goes. So here's how it looks so far. I'm actually really liking this. I abandoned trying to do the spiral motion with my sewing, and you can see from the back, I think, I kind of just randomly sewed in all directions, which seems to work better. So I had the yellow thread in. I'm now going to put pink thread in and keep going with the pink thread. And so now I can kind of just move the fabric in any way that I want it to go, so it can be all random. But if I see a piece of the fabric that's not laying down flat, I can aim for that piece and sew over it. I'm finding that the more that I'm sewing on top, the more I'm top stitching with the zigzag, the more I'm liking this. It just seems to be getting better and better. So I'm going to continue sewing. I'm going to continue with the pink. Actually, I like the pink. I may add a third color. I have the yellow and the pink now. You can see from the back, I have quite a bit of stitching going there. But I'm gonna keep going because this is working well. I think this looks great. I am way happier with this than I initially thought that I was going to be. So this is a nice little surprise, and I have some ideas for this block. I think I might cut this block up into smaller squares and then kind of have a backing along each square, but we'll try that a little bit later. But that's kind of what I'm thinking for this piece at this point. Now we have our other style that we made. This one, I have a piece of muslin along the back. And for this block, I'm just going to sew along the edge of the pieces. So let's try that. For this block, I want to go back to my straight stitch. I don't, on the initial block, I was using the zigzag. This one, I want to use a straight stitch. I've sewn around the edges using the yellow thread. As you can see, none of these pieces are really directly lined up perfectly, right? They're all a tiny bit wonky, and that's okay. And that's going to be the same in my seams. I'm not trying to make this block perfect. It's supposed to look a little like kind of all over the place, which is fine. Now I'm thinking, so I have lots more seams. You can see not everything is sewn here. So I'm thinking, what if I used a bright blue as my thread? So I'm going to try that. I'm going to put a bright blue into my thread and sew along a little bit more here. I'm not loving the blue thread quite so much, so I think I'm gonna change colors. Again, I have a little bit left of this pink, so I'm gonna put the pink in. I'm actually not loving this block as much, or this technique as much as I like this, which is so funny because when I first had laid these out before I did any sewing, I was not so crazy about how this one was turning out, and I thought this one was gonna be really cool. So it just goes to show, you never know. That's why we try different things, right? I finished this one. I'm not totally loving this. However, I did do the same thing that I did with this block on the other one that we made, and I paid a little bit more attention to keeping my lines really straight, and I didn't have any of the blue, and I like this one much better. So I think I'm going to use these two blocks in different ways, and then also use this block in a different way. So I'm excited to see what happens with these. And then I did go ahead, I wanted to use up the rest of my little small scraps, so I did make 2 more of these blocks. All right, let's take a look at what we've got here. I made an extra one of these. I can't remember which one I made first, but these I think are super cool, and I have an idea that I think will work well with these. So I'm gonna put these aside for a second, and we will come back to them in just a minute. And then we made these. We have these 3, and I'm gonna keep these 3 together. I also have this one over here, which was the one that didn't quite work as well as the other ones. And then I had also, I forgot, made this little one here. So I'm gonna keep these 2 together and these 3 together. And again, we'll come back to those in a minute, but let's start with these over here. What I'm thinking is this. I really like these pieces on this pop of teal here. I'll see if I can get you a little closer so you can really see. So I think that teal really kind of brings out some of these blues in the fabric here. So I'm going to cut each one of these squares in 4. So I'll cut it right down the middle and across, and I'll have 4 pieces and 4 pieces. And then I will just square them off, each one of the pieces to be the same size. And then I want to somehow attach them onto some of this teal fabric. Part of the whole fidget aspect of this is really interesting to touch and feel. And that's supposed to be, I do have some threads I'm seeing I need to trim here. But that's supposed to be kind of the experience with the fidget blanket, is things that are not only visually interesting, and I like all the shredding here. So when I cut this off initially, it probably won't have this frayed edge, but over time it certainly will have that frayed edge. So let's go ahead and cut these up and come up with a plan. It is the next day, and I cut those 2 larger squares into 4 squares each. So I have 8 of these squares. Each one is a little bit over 4 inches each. And I am pretty obsessed with these. I think they are amazing. They're beautiful. I couldn't have imagined that they would come out better. And I was initially thinking that I was going to put them on strips of this teal. So for example, I might do a row of 4 like that, and then I would, place this on, trim off the bottom, and I'd have 2 strips of 4 that I could kind of move around. But I think instead what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut out 8 squares of this teal, a little bit bigger than the 4-inch squares, and then each one will just be its own square with the teal backing. I cut out the teal backgrounds, and I made the backgrounds far larger than they will be, I think, in a project. But because I'm not exactly sure what I'm going to do with these yet, I wanted to give myself a little bit of extra room around each edge. So this would probably be more like a border this size, or even a little bit smaller. But I have more options if I just keep it large. So what I'm going to do next is sew these, top stitch these on to each piece. I'm going to do a regular straight stitch as close to the edge as I can get. I've secured all of my squares onto the backing, onto the teal backing. And so now these are done. I'm going to put these aside. I actually have a basket here that I think I want to start collecting all of my little pieces that I make for the fidget blankets. I want to start kind of putting these into this basket. And then once I have a lot of pieces made, I can start kind of pulling different portions from the basket and piecing them together. So since I'm not exactly sure what's going to happen to these, I'm going to throw them into the basket. And then what I remembered is that from trimming the 2 large squares into those smaller squares, I ended up with all of these little pieces here. And so I thought these are big enough that I could probably do something with these pieces. So what I'm thinking for these, I have this black fabric, and I thought that perhaps I would just cut a piece of this black fabric and sew these on in kind of a random way. Something like this. This one I think is too small, but this one would work. Something like that, or I'm not exactly sure what, but you get the idea. I'd play around with those, sew them on, and then I would have this piece, though I'm not sure how I'm feeling about that. That might just be, maybe I need to do something else with these. What if I line them up? And I could put, so maybe this ribbon on each side. Does that look good, or does that look ridiculous? Let's take away the ribbon and the black. I do like those pieces lined up, I think, more than I like them random. What if we put a piece of this batik down? Is this too similar in color, I wonder, or would that look cool? That's kind of interesting. I think I might like that. Let me think about this. I like this batik, and then what if I added this strip of trim right here on either side? So I'd have a strip here and a strip here. I think that could be cool. I'm gonna do that. So what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna make sure that I'm gonna trim all of these to be the exact same length, and then secure them on with my sewing machine, and then I'll add the trim on. Let's do it. here's where this block stands, which is a little different than when I last showed you. These are all sewn on all the way around the border. And then instead of doing the strips around the side with that trim, I put a piece on the top and the bottom. And I'm not sure how I'm feeling about this at this point. I'm a little confused by it. Part of me thinks it's really cool. Here, I'll get you a closer view. And part of me just thinks it's super odd, but not necessarily odd in a cool way, more like odd in a confusing way. I did just sew on this border to the side, but unfortunately instead of sewing it right sides together and then flipping it, I sewed it the wrong way, so I had to seam rip it. And then I decided just to take it off, because I actually, if you look at it with it on, I don't think it's better. I actually think it's worse with it on. So I took it off. So I think I might just leave this piece as is for now. So here's where we stand right now. I have this piece that I just did that I'm feeling a little confused about, and it's not that I don't like it. Part of me feels like I just need to put it aside for a little while and then come back to it, and I might be like, oh, I know what I'm gonna do with that, or really dislike it, or maybe really love it. Part of me really likes it. I think the colors all go really nicely together. It's just confusing me for some reason, I don't know. I do think I had better luck with these, and I think these are super cool. These could even be little pieces of art. If you did just line them up with, you know, like a black background or something and frame them, I think they would be very chic. I am gonna stop the video here today. I'll come back with part 2 where I'll finish up working with some of the other blocks that we had started that I have ideas for, but this video is just getting a little bit long. So I'm gonna stop the video here, and then we'll finish up with those blocks in the next video. I'm really loving playing with these fabrics and techniques and just kind of messing around a little bit. And I'm saying that these pieces are all gonna go into a fidget blanket, but I don't really know if that's the case. I mean, that's kind of the idea in my mind that I have, but a lot of these pieces aren't really feeling blanket-like. They're feeling more wall art-like. So we'll have to see what happens. I'm gonna continue on with the fidget blanket idea and then keep just making pieces for a blanket, but then I'm interested to see what ends up happening with these actual pieces. So join me next time. Don't forget to subscribe, and thanks for joining me. Bye.